Samuel Blackwood pushed open the door to Parker's Pizza, the small bell above the entrance chiming in a way that felt oddly personal, like a memory he couldn't quite place. He didn't even know why he was here. His driver had suggested a trendy 5-star restaurant uptown for lunch, but Samuel had waved him off and told him to drop him on this random block. Maybe he was just tired of the superficial crowds. Maybe he was trying to remember what real life felt like. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the air, rich and warm, nothing like the sterile boardrooms and polished lobbies he was used to. And then he saw her. Behind the counter, her hair tied up in a loose knot, smudged flour on her cheek, was Nora Parker. The woman he'd walked away from all those years ago, the one he never really got over. "Nora?" he said before he could stop himself. She looked up, her eyes widening for a split second before her face smoothed into calm neutrality. "Samuel Blackwood," she said, her voice steady but cool. "Didn't expect to see you in a place like this." Samuel swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked in his $1,000 suit, standing in her little pizza shop. "Neither did I," he admitted, managing a strained smile. "Guess I was craving something real." Her eyebrow arched, skeptical. "We serve pizza, not therapy." A customer called out for a pepperoni slice, and she turned away, moving with practiced ease. But Samuel saw it. The slight tremble in her hands, the way her eyes flickered toward him when she thought he wasn't watching. "Nice place," he said after a moment, sitting on a bar stool near the counter. "You own it?" Nora slid a plate of pizza toward a waiting customer before glancing back at him. "Yeah, mine and my son's." She emphasized that last word, like a challenge. "Your son?" Samuel echoed, feeling a strange ache he couldn't explain. "Didn't know you had one." Her eyes met his, sharp and cold. "You wouldn't. We haven't exactly kept in touch." Samuel's throat felt dry. "No, we haven't, but maybe we should have." He hesitated, searching her face for a hint of the girl he'd once loved. "You look good, Nora." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah? Flower and all? Not exactly black tie." "I wasn't looking for black tie," he said quietly, surprising himself. For a moment their eyes locked, and something passed between them, a flicker of something old, something broken and unfinished. But then a boy's voice rang out from the kitchen. "Mom, I can't find my math book." Nora turned sharply. "Check the second shelf, Marcus." Samuel blinked, the name echoing in his head. Marcus, her son. The kid poked his head around the corner, a shock of dark hair that looked a little too familiar for comfort. Samuel's heart dropped to his stomach. "Is that him?" Samuel asked, voice hoarse. Nora's eyes darkened. "Yeah, that's my son." Before he could ask anything else, a group of customers walked in, breaking the tension. Nora grabbed menus and greeted them, leaving Samuel sitting there, stunned. His phone buzzed in his pocket, Macy's name flashing across the screen. He ignored it. For the first time in a long time, Samuel Blackwood felt completely out of control, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to run from it or hold on tighter. The rest of that day, Samuel Blackwood couldn't think straight. He sat in his sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the Chicago skyline, but all he could see was Nora Parker, the flash of defiance in her eyes, the way her hands shook ever so slightly when she realized who he was. And her son, Marcus, she had called him. The name gnawed at Samuel's mind like a puzzle missing its final piece. "Mr. Blackwood?" His assistant Claire poked her head in. "You've got the quarterly report call with Tokyo in 5. Samuel looked up, realizing he'd been staring at the same page of a contract for the past half hour. "Reschedule it," he said, surprising both her and himself. Claire blinked. "Reschedule Tokyo?" "Yes," he said, standing up and tugging his cufflinks free. "Push it to tomorrow." She hesitated but nodded, leaving quietly. Samuel loosened his tie, pacing to the window. What was it about seeing Nora again that had him so rattled? And Marcus? Why did that boy's dark hair and sharp gaze strike a chord deep in his chest? He needed to know more. By late afternoon, Samuel was standing outside Parker's Pizza again, hands in his pockets, heart hammering in a way that was completely unlike him, the man who closed million-dollar deals before breakfast. "What am I even doing here?" Still, he opened the door, and the bell chimed like it had been waiting for him. Nora looked up from wiping a table, clearly caught off guard. "Twice in 2 days, Mr. Blackwood," she said, arching a brow. "To what do I owe the honor?" Samuel gave a sheepish smile. "Thought I'd give the pizza a second chance." She snorted but turned to grab a menu, keeping a safe distance. "We don't have corporate discounts, in case that's what you're looking for." "I'm not," he said, sliding onto a bar stool, "but I'm considering investing in local businesses. You know, branching out, community engagement, all that." "Right," she said flatly. Unimpressed. "Since when does Blackwood Industries care about small-town pizza places?" He smiled tightly. "Maybe I'm trying something different." "Or maybe," she shot back, folding her arms, "you're just here because you ran into an old mistake and can't stop picking at the scar." Her words hit harder than he expected, but Samuel didn't flinch. "You think you were a mistake?" "I don't know what to think," she muttered, turning to grab a tray of drinks for a table. "But I do know you shouldn't be here pretending this is about pizza." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "Okay," he said quietly, "you're right, it's not about pizza." Nora froze for a second but didn't turn around. "Then what is it about, Samuel?" There was a long pause before he answered. "I saw him yesterday," he said softly. "Your son?" She turned now, carefully neutral. "Yes, you did." Samuel stood from the bar stool, walking a little closer, but still keeping his distance. "Marcus, how old is he?" Her jaw tightened. "Why do you care?" "Because," he hesitated, "because he looks like me." His voice dropped, laced with something that surprised even him, vulnerability. "Is he mine?" The question hung between them like a live wire. Nora's grip on the tray tightened so hard her knuckles turned white. "Samuel," she said finally, her voice low and serious, "you don't get to come in here after 15 years and ask me that." "I need to know," he insisted, stepping forward now, eyes pleading. "Please, Nora, if he's mine, I have a right." "A right?" Her eyes blazed as she whirled around to face him fully. "You had the right to know a long time ago, but you weren't there. You left, remember? You walked away from me and never looked back." Samuel flinched. "I know. Please, Nora, I know. But I didn't know you were pregnant. You never told me." Her eyes filled with something. Anger, pain, regret. What would it have changed? "You had already chosen your future, Samuel. You made it clear that there was no room for me in that perfect life of yours." He shook his head. "I wouldn't have." "You don't know what you would have done," she snapped. "You don't know because you weren't there." The kitchen door swung open, and Marcus himself stepped out, holding a school backpack and a slice of pizza in hand. "Mom, can I?" He stopped short when he saw Samuel. Nora immediately softened as she turned toward her son. "Hey, sweetheart, go finish your homework, okay?" Marcus blinked at Samuel, curious, but shrugged and headed to the back. Samuel watched him go, a lump in his throat. "He looks like me. Same dark eyes, same stubborn chin." "Does he know who I am?" Samuel asked, voice rough. "No," Nora said sharply. "And I don't know if I want him to." Samuel stared at her, stunned. "You'd keep me from him?" "I'm protecting him," she whispered fiercely. "I've raised him on my own all these years. I've built a life for him, without you, without the mess of your world. He doesn't need that chaos, Samuel." "But he needs to know his father," Samuel whispered. Nora's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. "What he needs is stability. A mom who's always been there, not some man who shows up after 12 years deciding now he wants to play dad." Samuel swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Let me try. Let me be part of his life, Nora." She shook her head, stepping back as if putting distance between them would protect her heart. "I don't know if I can trust you with that." Samuel's hands balled into fists at his sides, fighting the urge to beg. "What would it take for you to trust me again?" She gave a bitter laugh. "I don't know if there's anything you can do to fix what's broken, Samuel." Before he could reply, her phone rang, probably a supplier. She looked at it, then back at him. "You should go," she said quietly, but with a finality that stabbed him. Samuel nodded slowly, swallowing his pride. "Okay," he murmured, "but I'm not giving up. I'll be back, Nora." Her eyes followed him as he walked out the door, and once he was gone, she leaned against the counter, breathing heavily, fighting tears. In the back room, Marcus peeked around the corner. "Mom, who was that man?" Nora wiped at her face quickly. "No one you need to worry about, baby." But even as she said it, her heart ached because she knew, one day soon, she might have to tell him the truth. Samuel had been restless all night, tossing and turning in his luxury penthouse overlooking the city. No matter how many contracts he reviewed or phone calls he took, he couldn't stop thinking about Nora and Marcus, his son. The words still felt foreign. 12 years of life he hadn't known existed. 12 birthdays, 12 Christmas mornings, first steps, first words, first everything. Without him. By the next morning, Samuel couldn't take it anymore. He needed to see Nora. Needed to talk without the counter or her sharp defensive words between them. So when he texted her, "Coffee? Just to talk, please, 1 hour," and she took 3 hours to reply, he honestly didn't think she would say yes. But when her answer came, short, almost reluctant, "Fine. 2 p.m., the corner brew." He felt a strange mix of hope and dread. At 2:05 p.m., Samuel walked into the corner brew, a small cafe tucked into a quieter part of the city. The kind of place with chipped mugs and creaky floorboards, a far cry from the polished cafes his usual clients preferred. But Nora was already there, seated by the window, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug like it was a shield. She looked up as he approached, and though her face was calm, her eyes were guarded. "You're late," she said flatly. Samuel slid into the chair across from her, loosening his tie. 5 minutes, he said with a small smile. "You used to give me 15 before threatening to leave." "That was a long time ago," she murmured, taking a sip of coffee. He studied her for a moment. "You look good, Nora." She gave a small, dry laugh. "You already said that yesterday. You need new lines." Samuel sighed, leaning back. "Look, I didn't ask you here to fight." "Then what did you ask me here for, Samuel? Because if it's to pretend like you didn't disappear on me all those years ago, I don't have the energy for that." He ran a hand down his face. "I deserve that. Probably a lot more." She looked out the window, her jaw tight. "Marcus," Samuel said softly. The name felt heavy on his tongue. "Is he mine?" Nora didn't speak for a moment. She watched a car pass, the people walking by, before finally turning back to him. "Yes," she said quietly. "He's yours." Samuel exhaled shakily, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. "Why didn't you tell me?" She flinched slightly, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Because when I found out I was pregnant, you were already gone. You chose your career, Samuel. You made that choice loud and clear, and I wasn't going to chase after you, begging for help." He shook his head. "I wouldn't have, wouldn't you?" She cut in, raising a brow. "You think you would have stayed? Given up Harvard? Given up Blackwood Industries? I knew you too well back then. You would have resented me. And resented him." Samuel swallowed, guilt rising like a tide. "I should have known. I should have been there." "Yeah," she whispered. "You should have." Silence fell between them, thick with all the years they couldn't get back. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat. "I want to be part of his life, Nora." Her eyes darkened. "You think you can just show up now and be his father?" "I am his father," Samuel said, more firmly than he felt. "Look, I know I missed a lot, but I'm here now. I'm not walking away from this." She looked at him, something flickering in her expression. Maybe sadness, maybe fear. "You don't even know him, Samuel. You don't know what he's like, what he needs. You don't know anything about our life." "Then help me get to know him," Samuel said gently. "Help me understand. Please." Nora let out a long sigh, rubbing her temples. "It's not that simple. You have your life, your career, your girlfriend." Samuel stilled. "Macy." Nora looked at him sharply. "Yeah, Macy Lanston. I read about her in the magazines. The perfect socialite, right? Beautiful, rich, loves the spotlight." "It's not like that," Samuel muttered. Nora laughed, but it was bitter. "Oh, Samuel, it's exactly like that. You think she's going to be okay with you suddenly playing dad to some kid she didn't sign up for?" "I don't care what Macy thinks," he said quickly, but the lie felt heavy in his chest. "Really?" Nora arched a brow. Because from where I'm sitting, you still care what everyone thinks. That's why you left me back then. Because your parents expected greatness. Because the world expected Samuel Blackwood to become a billionaire, not a family man with a small-town girl. Samuel looked away, jaw tight. Because she was right. I've changed, he said finally. Nora gave him a long look. Have you? She asked softly. Or are you just here because suddenly something unexpected popped up, and you want to control it like everything else in your life? That one stung, and Samuel had no answer. Nora stood, grabbing her purse. I need to get back to the restaurant. Samuel rose quickly, panic tightening in his chest. Nora, wait, please. She turned, and for the first time, he saw the tears swimming in her eyes. I don't know if I can do this, Samuel. I've spent 12 years building a safe life for Marcus. I don't know if I can let you walk into it and mess it all up. Samuel's voice was low, earnest. Let me prove that I won't mess it up. Nora swallowed, then turned to leave. You say that now, she said over her shoulder. But let's see if you're still saying it when Macy finds out. Samuel stood frozen as she walked out of the cafe, the door's little bell chiming behind her. And for the first time, Samuel realized this wasn't just about seeing Nora again. It was about fighting for a life he never knew he wanted. A life with a son he already loved, and a woman he never stopped loving. But Nora was right. What would Macy say when she found out? The rain tapped steadily against the windows of their small apartment above the pizza shop. Marcus Parker, 12 years old and curious beyond his years, sat on the floor of his mother's room, digging through old boxes in search of a flashlight he was sure she had. For a school project he was supposed to finish, but what he found instead stopped him cold. An old, dusty shoebox, tucked carefully in the corner of the closet, far behind worn sweaters and forgotten handbags. Something about the way it was hidden made him pause. Glancing toward the door to make sure his mom was still downstairs closing up the pizza place, Marcus slowly pulled the box out and popped the lid open. Inside were photographs and letters. Yellowed with time, like they'd been touched too many times or maybe not enough. He picked up a picture on top. It was a younger version of his mom, her hair longer and wilder, her smile softer. She was wrapped in the arms of a man Marcus didn't recognize. Dark hair, sharp jawline, wearing a suit like the ones on TV. Something about him seemed familiar. Marcus frowned and looked closer. The man had his eyes, same dark color, same shape. And as much as he tried to deny it, there was something in his crooked smile that looked like it had been staring back at him in the mirror every morning. Beneath the picture were letters, lots of them, some torn at the edges like they'd been read too many times. My Nora, one letter began, I hate that I can't be there, but you know I want the best for us, for our future. Marcus read until the letters blurred together. Who was this man? And why had his mom never mentioned him? Later that night, while Nora was cooking dinner, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, watching her like she was a stranger. Mom? He asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Who's Samuel? Nora froze. The spoon in her hand hovered over the pot of pasta sauce before she forced herself to move again. What? She asked too quickly. Samuel, Marcus repeated, watching her carefully. I found some old letters and pictures of you and him. She turned off the stove, her back still to him, and took a deep breath. Marcus, you shouldn't have been going through my things. I wasn't trying to snoop, he said defensively. But who is he? You looked happy. Like really happy. Nora turned around slowly, her face pale. He's someone I used to know, a long time ago. Was he your boyfriend? Marcus pressed. Your husband? My dad? The last words felt strange coming out of his mouth, but the second he said them, he knew the truth was in her eyes. She didn't have to say a word. Her face said it all. Mom, he whispered, standing now. Is he my dad? Nora pressed her lips together, clearly fighting back tears. Marcus, I think we should talk about this another time. Why? His voice was sharper now, rising. Why can't you just tell me? I have a right to know. Because it's complicated, she snapped, then closed her eyes, trying to calm herself. Please, let it go for now. But Marcus couldn't let it go. For the next few days, he peppered her with questions. Over breakfast, over dinner, while they walked to school and back. Was he a bad person? Is that why he's not around? Did he know about me? Did he leave because of me? Do I look like him? Do I act like him? Do you think he ever wonders about me? Nora tried to answer as little as possible, hoping he'd stop asking, but he didn't. And she could see that every unanswered question was hurting him more than the truth would. Finally, one quiet evening as the sun was setting, she found Marcus sitting on the porch steps, kicking at a loose stone on the pavement. His shoulders were slumped, his usual spark dimmed. Nora sat down beside him, her heart pounding. "Hey," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Hey." She took a deep breath, gathering courage she wasn't sure she had. "Marcus, I think it's time we had that talk." He stilled, his foot pausing mid-kick. Slowly he turned toward her, eyes wide. She reached over, brushing the hair from his face like she used to when he was little. "The man in those pictures, Samuel Blackwood, he's your father." Marcus didn't react right away. He blinked, processing the words like he wasn't sure he heard her right. "My father?" Nora nodded. "I never told you because he didn't know about you. I didn't tell him I was pregnant. Back then, his life was complicated, and I thought it was best to raise you on my own." "But why?" Marcus asked quietly. "Why didn't he get a chance to know me?" She swallowed. "Because I was scared, Marcus. Scared he wouldn't want us. Scared of the world he lived in, the money, the power, the expectations. I wanted to protect you from all that." Marcus was silent for a long time, then asked, "Does he know about me now?" Nora hesitated. "Yes, he does. I told him." Marcus's head snapped up, eyes wide. "You told him? What did he say?" She took a deep breath. "He wants to meet you." Marcus blinked. "He does?" "Yes, he wants to be part of your life." He looked away, staring at the street, chewing on his lip. "I don't know what to think," he said after a long while. "I mean, he's my dad, but he's a stranger." "I know," Nora whispered, her heart breaking. "And if you don't want to meet him, I'll understand." Marcus was quiet, thinking, before he finally asked, "What do you think, Mom? Should I meet him?" Nora blinked back tears. "I think you deserve to know where you came from, and he deserves to know you. But I'll be there, every step, if you want." Marcus took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Okay, maybe we can meet him." Nora exhaled a shaky breath, pulling him into a hug. "You're so brave, baby." He hugged her back, but asked quietly, "Do you think he'll like me?" She smiled through her tears. "Oh, Marcus, he's going to love you." And as she held her son close, Nora knew everything was about to change. But maybe, just maybe, it was time for all of them to face the truth, together. Samuel was sitting at his massive mahogany desk, the city skyline glittering beyond his office windows, when his phone buzzed with a text message. For the past week, he'd been waiting for this, hoping, praying, checking his phone like a man possessed, though he would never admit that to anyone. When he saw Nora's name, his chest tightened. "Nora, Marcus wants to meet you. If you're still sure you want that, we can arrange something." Samuel stared at the screen, rereading the words like they might change if he blinked. His heart hammered in his chest, part fear, part relief. He was going to meet his son. With shaking hands, he typed back, "Samuel, yes, please, just say when and where." His phone buzzed again. "Nora, tomorrow, after school, at the pizza place, just us." Samuel exhaled slowly, a weight shifting in his chest. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. It was happening. It was real. He was still trying to catch his breath when the door to his office burst open without a knock. "Macy," he said sharply, sitting up straighter, instinctively adjusting his tie. "What are you doing here?" Macy Lanston swept into the room, all polished elegance in her designer suit and perfectly styled blonde waves, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Funny," she said with a cold smile, tossing her handbag onto a chair. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Samuel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Macy crossed her arms, her expression sharp as glass. "I just got off the phone with Nora Parker." Samuel's breath caught, but he kept his face carefully neutral. "Why would you be speaking to Nora?" "Oh, don't play dumb, Samuel." Macy snapped, stepping closer. Samuel, you have been distracted and I had to find out what been going on with you. Then I learned that boy at the pizza place is your son Samuel. The son you conveniently never mentioned. Samuel stood, squaring his shoulders. You had no right to have me followed. And you had no right to make me look like a fool. Macy shot back. The entire city is already whispering about you and some pizza woman, and now I find out she has your child? His jaw clenched. It's not her fault. Oh, but it's mine? Macy let out a sharp laugh. Unbelievable. I've stood by you, Samuel. I've dealt with the long hours, the business dinners, the endless press appearances. And now I'm supposed to smile pretty while you play house with some woman from your past and a kid you didn't even know existed? Samuel ran a hand through his hair, frustration brimming. Macy, this isn't about you. It's about Marcus. Oh, now he's Marcus, is he? Gotten that comfortable already? She sneered. Stop it, he said sharply, glaring. You don't understand. Then make me understand, Samuel, she yelled, her voice rising. Because right now, it looks like you're throwing away everything we've built for some little pizza shop family you didn't even know last month. Samuel felt his temper snap. Maybe because what we've built isn't real, Macy. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Samuel said, his voice cold, that I don't love you, Macy. Maybe I never did. Maybe I just let myself believe I was supposed to, because you fit the life my parents wanted for me, because it looked good on paper. Her face went pale, but her fury only deepened. And what about us? What about the life we've planned? Marriage, the business merger. What, you think you can just walk away? Samuel took a deep breath, straightening his cuffs. If that's what it takes to be in my son's life? Yes, I'll walk away from all of it. Macy stared at him like she didn't recognize him. Like this wasn't the same man who'd once done whatever was expected to maintain his image. You think Nora Parker is going to give you some perfect family? Macy hissed. She's been hiding your kid from you for 12 years, Samuel. You think that kind of woman is suddenly going to play house with you? You're a fool if you believe that. Samuel's jaw tensed. Say what you want about me, but don't you dare speak about Nora like that. Macy's eyes filled with a dangerous glint. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Yes, his voice was firm. I am. She took a slow, deep breath, adjusting her designer coat like armor. Fine, but don't expect me to sit quietly while you ruin everything. Samuel frowned. What does that mean? It means, Macy said with a poisonous smile, that if you think this won't get ugly, you're wrong, that you've just made yourself a very powerful enemy, Samuel. And Nora? She'll wish she never crossed my path. With that, she turned on her heel and stalked out, slamming the office door behind her. Samuel stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space she left behind, heart pounding. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of the decision he'd just made and the storm that was coming. But even as the fear crept in, one thought kept him steady. Tomorrow, he would meet Marcus, his son, and no matter what Macy threw at him, he wasn't going to let anything keep him away this time. The next morning, Samuel stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, looking out at the city he ruled, or used to. For the first time in years, his empire felt small, like an illusion of control that was slipping through his fingers. He hadn't heard from Macy since her outburst in his office. Not that he expected to. She always hit hard and then pulled back, waiting for him to apologize. But this time, he wasn't going to. He couldn't. Instead, his mind was consumed with one thing. Marcus, his son. Somehow, that word was both terrifying and grounding. There was a whole human being, a boy, walking around with his eyes, his stubborn jaw, and he had missed everything. The thought alone made him feel like he couldn't breathe. He was supposed to meet Marcus today, and for once, no meeting, no deal, no merger could compare to that. His phone buzzed relentlessly on the kitchen counter. Emails, board members, Macy's name flashing like a warning sign. But he let it ring and ring. Finally, there was a knock at the door, sharp, impatient. Samuel didn't have to guess who it was. When he opened it, Martha Blackwood, his mother, in her designer coat and pearls, every inch the poised matriarch, swept in like she owned the place. "Samuel," she said curtly, glancing around as though checking for signs of chaos. "Why haven't you been answering my calls?" He exhaled heavily, closing the door behind her. "I've been busy." She turned to face him, her sharp gaze narrowing. "Too busy to answer your mother? Too busy to explain why Macy is calling me in tears?" Samuel stiffened. "I think you know why." Martha set her purse down on the edge of his pristine leather sofa and crossed her arms. "She told me some very concerning things. About this woman, this Nora Parker, and some child who, according to Macy, you're now claiming is yours." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly tired. "It's not a claim. He is mine. His name is Marcus. He's 12. Martha blinked, clearly rattled for a second before composing herself. 12. "Yes," Samuel said firmly. 12 years I didn't know about because I left Nora behind to chase all of this." He gestured toward the penthouse, toward everything he'd built. His mother's lips thinned into a tight line. "Now what? You're going to throw your life away for a woman who kept your child from you?" Samuel turned to look out the window, jaw tight. "She didn't keep him from me. I left. I never gave her a chance to tell me." Martha scoffed softly. "You think that absolves her? That doesn't explain why she never reached out." Samuel faced her now, eyes sharp. "Maybe because she knew I was too busy becoming the man you and Dad wanted me to be, and not the man I should have been." "I wasn't ready then." He cut her off, voice softer now but resolute. "But I'm ready now." Martha's eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained sharp. "You have responsibilities, Samuel. This company, our family name, your reputation." "Maybe I don't care about my reputation anymore," he said quietly. Her eyes widened as though he'd spoken blasphemy. "Don't say that. Everything you've worked for, everything we've built, depends on your image, your alliances. You and Macy." "There is no me and Macy." Samuel interrupted firmly. "Not anymore." Martha stared at him, truly shocked now. "You're ending things with her? After everything? After all the years?" "Yes," he said, voice unyielding. "Because she was never what I wanted." Martha took a deep breath, regaining her composure. "So what now? You play house with this woman and her son? You think that'll be enough for you?" Samuel stepped closer, his eyes hard. "He's not just her son, he's my son. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to do what's right, not what looks good in a boardroom." Martha faltered, the mask slipping from her face, revealing something like hurt. "Your father and we only ever wanted what was best for you." Samuel's jaw softened, but his voice remained steady. "No, you wanted what was best for the Blackwood name, not for me. But I'm done being what everyone expects." Silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken words. Finally, Martha picked up her purse, glancing back at him. "Your father won't be pleased when he hears about this." Samuel let out a breath, bracing himself. Maybe it's time he heard it anyway. Martha lingered at the door for a long moment, her hand on the handle. She turned to look at her son, and for a split second, her eyes softened. "If you do this, Samuel, you'll be changing everything. There's no going back." Samuel met her gaze evenly. "I know." She studied him for a moment longer, then gave a small, sad smile. Maybe that's not such a bad thing." Samuel blinked, surprised, but before he could say anything, she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. He stood alone in the silence of his penthouse, but for the first time, it didn't feel like home. Tomorrow, he would meet his son, and nothing would ever be the same. The smell of fresh pizza and garlic bread wafted through Parker's Pizza, but Samuel barely noticed as he stood just inside the door, heart pounding so loud he thought everyone could hear it. He had faced boardrooms full of ruthless executives, negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. But this, meeting Marcus, felt like the most terrifying thing he had ever done. He wiped his damp palms on his slacks and glanced around. The shop was quiet this afternoon, closed to the public for their meeting. Nora had insisted on privacy, and he was grateful for it. From the kitchen door, Nora stepped out, her eyes soft but watchful, protective. She gave him a small nod, the kind that said, "Are you ready for this?" Samuel nodded back, though he wasn't sure if he was ready at all. Then he heard it. Footsteps, sneakers, squeaking on the floor. When Marcus appeared from behind the counter, Samuel's breath caught in his throat. The boy had his eyes, his mouth, his dark hair, a little messier, but definitely his. But it wasn't just the resemblance that hit him, it was the realization of everything he had missed. First words, first steps, school concerts, bedtime stories, scraped knees. "Marcus," Nora said gently, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "This is Samuel, the man I told you about." Marcus's eyes flicked up, studying Samuel with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He stuffed his hands in the pocket of his hoodie, fidgeting, but didn't say anything. Samuel swallowed the lump in his throat and took a small step closer, though he was careful to give the boy space. "Hey, Marcus," he said quietly. "It's really good to meet you." Marcus shrugged, not looking directly at him. "Yeah. Okay," winced but nodded, forcing a small smile. "Your mom tells me you're into baseball?" Marcus glanced at his mom, then back at Samuel. "Yeah? So?" Samuel smiled, a bit more genuine this time. "I used to play in high school. I wasn't very good, though. Always struck out when it mattered." That earned him a tiny smirk from Marcus. "Yeah? I'm a pitcher." Samuel's heart warmed. "A pitcher, huh? Bet you've got a good fastball." Marcus shrugged again, but this time there was a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Maybe." Nora watched them quietly, holding her breath. Samuel stepped forward carefully and sat on one of the stools at the counter, leaning forward like he wasn't in a suit worth thousands of dollars, like he was just a dad trying to connect. "Listen, Marcus, I know this is probably weird for you. It's weird for me too," Samuel admitted honestly. "I didn't know about you. I wish I had, but now that I do, I want to know you, if you'll let me." Marcus finally looked up at him directly, eyes sharp, like he was trying to see if Samuel was lying. "Why now?" he asked quietly, but there was a bite to it. "Why do you care now?" Samuel swallowed hard. "Because I should have cared a long time ago. Because I was too focused on all the wrong things. I've made a lot of mistakes, Marcus, but I don't want to make this one." The boy's face was unreadable, his arms crossed over his chest. "Mom said you didn't know, but why didn't she tell you?" Samuel glanced at Nora, who looked away, guilt flashing in her eyes. "I think," Samuel said carefully, "because she was trying to protect you, and maybe protect herself too." "Protect me from what?" Marcus asked sharply. Samuel hesitated, choosing his words. "From the life I was living back then, from people who might have made things harder for both of you. She did what she thought was best." Marcus's jaw tensed, clearly working through complicated emotions no 12-year-old should have to carry. "So what? You think you can just show up now and be my dad?" Samuel's heart ached at the words, but he shook his head. "No. I don't expect that, Marcus. Not right away. Not if you're not ready. But I want to try. I want to be part of your life, however you'll let me." Marcus looked away, struggling. His fingers picked at the sleeve of his hoodie, nervous energy rolling off him in waves. "Do you even know anything about me?" he asked finally, quieter this time. Samuel smiled softly, leaning in. "I know you like baseball. I know you like extra cheese on your pizza. I know you're smart and stubborn and that you're a good kid, because your mom raised you to be." Marcus blinked, a little surprised at the sincerity in Samuel's voice. "I want to know more," Samuel added, leaning in slightly. "If you'll tell me." The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Marcus mumbled, I guess we could hang out, like, just to see." Samuel's heart swelled, but he kept his voice steady. "I'd like that. You tell me when." "Maybe we could play catch or something," Marcus said, not meeting his eyes. "If you're not too busy." Samuel smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. "I'm never too busy for you. Not anymore." Marcus finally glanced up at him, and though there was still uncertainty in his eyes, there was also something else, a flicker of hope. "Okay," Marcus said softly. "Maybe we'll see." Samuel nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, maybe we'll see." Nora, standing behind Marcus, wiped a tear from her cheek before quickly turning away to give them space. As Samuel watched his son, his heart heavy and full at the same time, he knew this was only the beginning. but it was a beginning he wasn't going to give up on, no matter how long it took. It had been 2 days since Samuel had met Marcus for the first time. 2 days of hope, cautious conversations, and small steps toward a relationship Samuel had never expected, but now wanted more than anything. But while Samuel was beginning to build something real with Marcus, Macy Lanston was preparing to destroy it. She sat in the back of an exclusive, members-only club, swirling a glass of red wine, her phone in hand as she scrolled through photos of Samuel and Nora's pizza place that had been snapped by curious onlookers and a few nosy reporters. "Pathetic," she muttered under her breath, her jaw tight. Across from her sat Clara Hastings, a well-known gossip columnist and social influencer, always hungry for scandal, always eager to sink her teeth into a juicy story. "So," Clara said, leaning forward with a predatory smile, "what's this? I'm hearing about Samuel Blackwood slumming it with some pizza girl and a surprise kid." Macy smirked, finally putting down her wineglass. "Oh, it's worse than that." She leaned in as if sharing a secret. "Nora Parker, that's her name, is nothing but a gold digger. She's been keeping that boy hidden for 12 years and now, out of nowhere, she brings him into Samuel's life?" Clara's eyes lit up with interest. "Hidden? You think she knew who Samuel was all along?" Macy gave a sharp, fake laugh. "Of course she knew. Samuel was already on track to be a billionaire when they were young. And now that he's at the top, suddenly she wants to introduce him to her kid? His kid, allegedly." She rolled her eyes. "Honestly, who's to say the boy is even his?" Clara leaned back in her chair, a calculating look in her eyes. "You think she's trying to trap him?" "I don't think. I know," Macy said smoothly, adjusting her designer sunglasses even though they were indoors. "She's using that boy to get to Samuel, trying to claw her way into his world, our world. And trust me, she'll ruin him in the process." Clara's grin widened. "That'll make a hell of a story." "Make sure it does," Macy said coldly. "You can say she used to be troubled too, a wild past, unstable maybe. Whatever it takes to make people see her for what she is, someone who shouldn't be anywhere near Samuel." Clara nodded, already typing on her phone. "Consider it done." Macy sat back, satisfied. Let her try to play family with Samuel. When this gets out, she'll be toxic. The board won't want Samuel near her. His family won't stand for it. And Samuel, he'll realize she's a mistake. The next morning, Nora was unlocking the pizza shop, humming softly to herself, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had seen Marcus smile last night in a way he hadn't before, a real smile. Samuel had given him hope. But as she turned to flip the sign on the door, her phone buzzed with message after message, vibrating relentlessly. Confused, she pulled it from her pocket. There they were, headlines splashed across her screen, full of ugly words. Samuel Blackwood's secret past, gold digger and love child. Who is Nora Parker? Shocking details about Blackwood's new flame and the boy she hid from him. Sources say Nora Parker is manipulating Blackwood with claims of a child. But is he even his? Nora's heart dropped into her stomach as she read each headline, each lie worse than the last. Gold digger, manipulator, liar. Her hands trembled as she kept scrolling, and a photo of her and Marcus walking down the street appeared, circled in red like they were some scandal. "Mom," Marcus's small voice made her jump. He stood in the doorway of the shop, backpack slung over his shoulder, frowning as he saw her pale face. "What's wrong?" She shoved the phone into her pocket, forcing a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart, just some news." He wasn't convinced, but didn't push, though his eyes stayed worried. An hour later, the shop was open, but Nora barely noticed the customers. People whispered as they came in, their eyes lingering on her longer than usual, and it didn't take long for her to realize why. "Have you seen this?" one woman whispered to her friend, both of them glancing sideways at Nora. "She's that woman, right? The one who trapped Samuel Blackwood?" Nora's face burned. The bell over the door jingled, and when she looked up, she was surprised to see Samuel standing there, his face grim. He walked straight to her, not even acknowledging the few customers who were now watching them openly. "We need to talk," he said firmly. Nora swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. So you saw it? He nodded. Yeah, I saw it. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest. Let me guess, Macy? Samuel sighed. I'm sure of it. She's behind this. Great, Nora muttered, her voice bitter. So now the entire city thinks I'm some money-hungry liar who's been planning this for years. Samuel stepped closer, his voice low. I don't believe any of it, Nora. I know who you are. She looked away, her throat tight. That doesn't stop them from saying it. And Marcus... Samuel, what if he hears this at school? What if people say this stuff to him? Samuel reached out to take her hand, but she pulled away. Nora? I knew this would happen, she said, her voice breaking. I knew if you got involved it would destroy everything I've built for him, for us. Samuel's face filled with guilt. I didn't want this, Nora. I swear. But I won't let Macy do this to you, or Marcus. How? She asked, her voice sharp. How are you going to stop her, Samuel? Go to the press? Give them more fuel? What are you going to say? That you didn't know about Marcus? That you left me? He flinched, but didn't look away. I'll do whatever I have to. I'll set the record straight. Nora shook her head. You don't get it. This is my life. My son's life. You can walk away from this mess, but we have to live with it. Samuel looked devastated but determined. I'm not walking away, Nora. Not from you. Not from Marcus. I'll fight this. I'll fight for you. For him. She swallowed hard, tears brimming in her eyes. You should go, Samuel. I need time to think. Nora? Please. Her voice broke on the word, but she stood firm. Samuel hesitated, his heart breaking, but he finally nodded. Okay, but I'm not giving up on either of you. As he walked out of the shop, the eyes of strangers burning holes into Nora's back, she wiped at her face and took a shaky breath, her heart heavy with fear. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. And Macy Lanston, wherever she was, had made her message clear. Stay away from Samuel, or I'll ruin you. Samuel didn't wait long to confront Macy. By the time he left Nora's pizza shop that morning, he was burning inside, with anger, with heartbreak, with frustration. He called Macy before he even got back to his car. Samuel, she answered smoothly, as if nothing had happened, her voice sickeningly sweet. I was hoping you'd call. I assume you've seen today's headlines? His jaw clenched. We need to talk, now, in person. There was a pause, then that icy smile slid back into her voice. Your place or mine? Neither. My office. In an hour. He hung up before she could answer. Macy sauntered into his office like she owned the building, wearing a flawless designer suit and sunglasses she didn't bother to take off. So serious, she teased, sitting on the edge of his desk. What's the matter, darling? Don't like a little bad press? Samuel glared at her. You did this. She shrugged, examining her manicured nails. I did what I had to do. You left me no choice. You humiliated her. Samuel spat, standing over her. You dragged her name through the mud. You dragged my son through the mud. Macy laughed coldly. Your son? Don't be so sure. For all you know, she could be lying. Don't, he said darkly. Don't you dare talk about them like that. She arched a brow, standing to face him. You think I'm just going to sit back while you destroy everything we've built? While you choose some small-town pizza girl over me? Over us? There is no us, Macy, he said, his voice sharp, final. There never was. I just didn't see it until now. Her face hardened. So that's it? You're throwing me away for them? I'm ending this because it was never real. You and I, we were a business arrangement disguised as a relationship. His voice softened slightly, but it was resolute. I'm sorry if I let you think it was more. Macy's eyes filled with rage, but her voice stayed icy. You'll regret this, Samuel. Mark my words. Maybe, he said, his heart aching for a very different reason. But at least I'll regret it for the right reasons. Without another word, Macy stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving Samuel standing alone, knowing this was the right decision, but feeling like his world was still crumbling. By the time Samuel returned to Nora's shop that evening, he looked exhausted, suit rumpled, tie loosened, and dark circles under his eyes. His usual polished confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. The shop was quieter now, with only a couple of customers sitting in the back. Marcus was behind the counter, helping Nora with napkins and menus. When he spotted Samuel, his eyes lit up just a little, but Nora's expression stayed guarded. "Samuel," she said, surprised to see him back so soon. "What are you doing here?" He shoved his hands in his pockets, his eyes full of emotion. "I ended things with Macy." Nora blinked, not expecting that. "You, what?" "I told her it's over," he said quietly, stepping closer. "I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm done living the life everyone else wants for me." Nora stared at him, heart aching. "Samuel, I didn't ask you to do that." "I know," he said, his voice breaking, "but I needed to, because I want to be here, with you, with Marcus." She looked away, swallowing hard. "You can't just undo 12 years with a few grand gestures." "I'm not trying to undo anything," Samuel said, stepping closer. "I'm trying to start from where we are now." Nora shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "I'm glad you're trying, but right now, Marcus needs stability, not more chaos. And you're still figuring out what you want." Samuel's heart dropped. "I know what I want." She met his gaze, her eyes full of pain. "Maybe you think you do, but I'm not ready to bring you into Marcus's life like that. Not yet." "But I want to be his father," Samuel said, his voice desperate now. "I want to be there for him." "And maybe you will be," Nora said quietly, "but for now I need to protect him from everything that comes with you. The press, Macy, your world. He deserves better than being caught in a war between adults." Samuel took a deep breath, fighting the sting in his eyes. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," she whispered, "I can't give you us. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Samuel felt like the ground shifted beneath him. He nodded slowly, though it broke him inside. "I understand." "Do you?" Nora asked gently. "Yeah," he whispered. "I do. It's my world." Marcus peeked out from the back and gave Samuel a small wave, oblivious to the storm between the adults. Samuel forced a smile and waved back before turning to leave. Back in his glass tower, Samuel buried himself in work. If he wasn't working, he wasn't thinking. About Nora, about Marcus, about what he'd lost. His once proud team now walked on eggshells around him. "Mr. Blackwood?" his assistant Claire asked cautiously one day. "You've been in meetings non-stop for 3 weeks. Maybe you should take a break?" "I don't need a break," Samuel snapped, not even looking up from his laptop. "What I need is for people to stop wasting my time." Claire swallowed and backed away, exchanging glances with the other employees who whispered behind his back. "The boss is losing it." The man who had once charmed investors with an easy smile was now cold, sharp, and ruthless. Deals were made without compassion, employees fired on the spot for small mistakes, but none of it filled the hole inside. Every night, Samuel sat in his penthouse, glass of whiskey in hand, untouched, staring out at the city lights, thinking about the son who looked like him, about the woman he let slip away again. His phone sat on the table beside him, quiet, dark. He hadn't heard from Nora. He hadn't expected to, not after what happened. But still, he waited. Because even though Samuel Blackwood had everything money could buy, he realized now that love, family, the things he'd been too blind to fight for, those were the only things that ever really mattered. And now, he might have lost them for good. The sound of Samuel's heavy footsteps echoed through the empty boardroom as he walked in, ignoring the sideways glances from his executive team as they quietly gathered their things and slipped out, leaving him alone. The deal he had just closed was massive, a merger that would have made headlines any other day. But Samuel didn't care. He had closed the deal with a coldness that unnerved even his toughest board members. As he stood by the window overlooking the city, his suit rumpled and tie half loosened, he drained the last of the whiskey in his glass. It didn't make him feel any better. Nothing did. Behind him, the boardroom door opened. He didn't turn. Probably Claire again, trying to get him to eat something. But then a familiar voice, sharp and commanding, filled the room. "That's enough of that, Samuel." Samuel's shoulders stiffened. He turned slowly to see his father, Henry Blackwood, standing in the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, eyes cold but watchful. "Didn't expect to see you here, Dad," Samuel muttered, turning back to the window. What? Come to tell me how disappointed you are? You can get in line. Henry stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft but firm click. I'm not here to talk about your deals, son, or your little drama with Macy. I'm here to talk about you. Samuel gave a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Really? You've spent my entire life talking about the business, the family name, making sure I played the part you and Mom wanted. Now you care about me? Henry's jaw tensed, but his eyes didn't waver. Sit down, Samuel. Don't start with me, Samuel growled, rubbing the back of his neck. I said sit down. Something in Henry's tone, the steel edge of a father who wasn't taking no for an answer, made Samuel's legs move before his brain caught up. He sank into a chair, suddenly feeling like he was 16 again and facing one of his father's lectures. But this time, Henry didn't stand over him like a judge. He sat across from Samuel, his hands resting calmly on the table. I've been watching you, Henry said evenly, and I'm not just talking about business. Samuel scoffed. What else is there to watch? You, Henry said firmly, falling apart, pushing everyone away, turning into a man I don't recognize. Samuel stiffened but said nothing. Henry leaned forward, voice lower now. You think I don't know what's happening? You think I haven't heard what Macy's been saying about that woman, Nora? Samuel's hands balled into fists. She's not that woman. She's the mother of my son. And why the hell aren't you fighting for them then? Henry shot back, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. Samuel blinked, caught off guard. What? Henry slammed his hand on the table, making Samuel jump. You heard me. Instead of fighting for them, you're sitting up here in this glass tower, drowning in work like a coward, drinking yourself stupid every night and lashing out at people who don't deserve it. Samuel's mouth went dry. You think I don't know that look, Henry said, his voice softer now but still filled with fire. You think I haven't been there myself, watching everything you love slip away because you're too damn stubborn to admit you're scared? Samuel swallowed hard, looking away. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, Henry said quietly. I spent half my life chasing the same things I pushed you to chase. Success, money, reputation. And in the process, I almost lost your mother. Samuel looked up, surprised. You and Mom? Henry nodded slowly, a sad smile on his lips. Oh, yeah, you think our marriage was always perfect? No, son. I nearly lost her because I was too busy building an empire to see the woman I loved standing right in front of me, hurting. Samuel felt his chest tighten, his father's words hitting too close to home. She stayed, Henry said softly, because your mother's stronger than I ever deserved. But not everyone sticks around forever, Samuel. He met his son's eyes firmly. You keep sitting here licking your wounds, and you'll lose them both. Nora and that boy, your son. Samuel looked down at his hands, voice raw. What if I already have? Henry exhaled, leaning back. Then you fight like hell to get them back. Samuel's throat tightened, a lump he couldn't swallow. It's not that easy. Nora doesn't trust me. She wants to protect Marcus from me, from all of this. He waved at the city skyline beyond the glass. From who I am? Henry gave him a hard look. Then show her you're someone worth trusting. Show her you're not just your name or this company. Show him, your boy, that you're someone who stays. Samuel blinked rapidly, fighting the burn in his eyes. I don't know how to do that. Henry's expression softened, a flicker of something Samuel rarely saw, compassion. Then start small, be there, show up, do the hard work. Not just the big grand gestures. You think when I almost lost your mom, I fixed it with flowers and jewelry? No, I fixed it by being there, every day, every time she needed me. Samuel stared at his father, a part of him realizing maybe this was the first time they'd ever really spoken like this. Man to man, father to son. Henry stood slowly, straightening his coat. You're not a boy anymore, Samuel. You don't get to run when it's hard. You fight for what matters, or you lose it. He paused at the door, turning back one last time. Don't make the same mistake I almost made. You think being Samuel Blackwood means being strong? Then be strong enough to love them the way they deserve. With that, Henry walked out, leaving Samuel sitting there, his father's words echoing louder than any boardroom speech ever had. For a long time, Samuel sat there, staring at the empty chair across from him, his mind racing. Maybe Henry was right. Maybe it wasn't too late. But if he wanted a chance, even a small one, he had to change. Not for himself, for Marcus, for Nora, for the family he never thought he'd have. For the first time in weeks, Samuel Blackwood didn't walk into his office at sunrise. Instead, he stood in front of Parker's Pizza, hands shoved in his pockets, heart pounding in his chest like a teenager on a first date. Though what he was about to do meant far more than any date he'd ever been on. He took a long breath. No bodyguards, no assistant, no limousine parked outside. Just him, in jeans and a sweater, a far cry from his usual polished suits. Today wasn't about Samuel Blackwood, CEO. Today was about Samuel, the man who wanted to show up for his son. As he reached for the door, it swung open before he could touch it. Marcus stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, baseball cap twisted sideways, looking surprised, and maybe a little wary. "Hey," Samuel said quietly, giving a small, uncertain smile. "You headed to school?" Marcus frowned slightly. "Yeah, what are you doing here?" Samuel cleared his throat. "I thought maybe I could give you a ride." Marcus blinked, confused. "You want to drive me to school? Only if you're okay with it," Samuel said quickly. "If not, that's okay too. I wanted to try and be here more, like I said." Marcus didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed, studying Samuel like he was a complicated math problem he hadn't figured out yet. From inside, Nora appeared, her hand still holding the door. She looked between them, clearly caught off guard. "Samuel," she said cautiously, "what are you doing?" Samuel turned to her, nervous but determined. "I was hoping to take Marcus to school. If that's okay." Her eyes softened slightly, though she kept her voice careful. "You don't have to prove anything, Samuel." "I know," he said quietly. "But I want to." Nora looked at Marcus, silently asking what he wanted. Marcus shrugged one shoulder, but he didn't say no. "Okay," Nora said after a long moment. "But be on time. And don't let him talk you into skipping school for pizza." Marcus smirked. Samuel laughed, really laughed, and for a moment something felt easy between them all, like maybe this could work. "Come on, kid," Samuel said, leading Marcus to his car. Not a Bentley or some sleek sports car, but a simple SUV he'd picked up just for this. Something normal. Something that wouldn't make Marcus feel like he was being paraded around. The car ride was quiet at first, but not as awkward as Samuel had feared. "You play baseball, right?" Samuel asked as they stopped at a red light. Marcus nodded, glancing out the window. "Yeah. Pitcher." Samuel smiled. "Your mom said that. You any good?" Marcus shrugged, but Samuel caught the hint of pride. "I guess. Coach says I've got a fast arm." "I'd love to see that sometime," Samuel offered gently. Marcus glanced at him, suspicious. "Why? You don't even know me." Samuel swallowed but kept his voice soft. "Because I want to. I want to know everything about you. If you'll let me." Marcus looked away, but Samuel saw the way his fingers fidgeted in his lap, like he wanted to believe, but wasn't sure if he should. When they pulled up to the school, Samuel parked and turned to him. "Hey, Marcus?" "Yeah?" "I'm gonna keep showing up, okay? Even if it takes time, even if you don't want me to. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Marcus looked at him for a long moment, eyes searching his face. "Okay," he said quietly, "we'll see." Samuel smiled, feeling like maybe that was a win, even if it was small. "Have a good day, champ." Marcus gave a small grin. "Don't call me champ," Samuel laughed. "All right, but I'm still coming to your game next week." Marcus didn't answer but walked away with a small smile. Samuel clung to like a lifeline. Samuel returned to Parker's Pizza just before Nora's shift ended, waiting quietly at a corner table. When she saw him, she hesitated before walking over, drying her hands on a towel. "You're persistent," she said softly. He smiled, but there was a weight in his gaze. "I told you I would be." She sat across from him, her eyes searching. "You really took him to school?" Samuel nodded. "Yeah. Just wanted to do something right for once." Nora looked down, playing with the edge of a napkin. "You don't have to keep proving yourself, Samuel." But I do, he said gently. Not to win you back. Not to make some grand gesture, but because I want Marcus to know I'm not walking away, not this time. Nora blinked back tears, her voice breaking slightly. I don't want him to get hurt, Samuel. I know, he said softly, and I don't want to hurt him either. I've made a lot of mistakes, Nora, but I'm trying to fix the ones I can, and I'm hoping maybe one day you'll let me fix what I broke with you too. She swallowed, her heart in her throat. Samuel, I know you're scared, he whispered. I'm scared too, but I'm not going anywhere. Even if you never want me back, I'll be here. For him, for you. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him, really looked. And for the first time in weeks, she believed him. I think Marcus wants that, she whispered. Even if he doesn't know how to say it yet. Samuel smiled gently, reaching out to touch her hand. And this time, she didn't pull away. In the days that followed, Samuel kept his word. He picked Marcus up from school. He sat through baseball practice, cheering from the sidelines like an ordinary dad. He even helped Nora close up the pizza shop at night, stacking chairs and wiping down tables without complaint. And though Nora was still cautious, she started to smile again when she saw him. Marcus, too, started to laugh more around him, testing Samuel's knowledge of baseball and teasing him about not knowing the latest video games. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything Samuel dreamed, but it was something real. And for the first time in his life, Samuel Blackwood was learning what it meant to fight for the people he loved. Not with power or money, but with time, patience, and heart. And he wasn't planning to stop. It had been weeks since Samuel made the decision to show up for Marcus and for Nora. And he had kept his word. Every day he was there, for school drop-offs, baseball practice, even quiet dinners when Nora would finally let him stay. Slowly, the walls around Marcus and Nora were beginning to crack, though Samuel knew there was still a long way to go. What he hadn't expected was the call from his mother. He had been sitting at Nora's kitchen table, helping Marcus with his math homework. Though, truth be told, Marcus was explaining most of it to him when his phone buzzed with a call from Martha Blackwood. Samuel stared at the screen, unsure if he should answer. Nora watched him carefully from the stove, and Marcus glanced up too. Finally, Samuel swiped to answer. Mom? Samuel, Martha's voice was calm but formal as always. Your father and I would like to invite you and them for lunch this Sunday, here, at the house. Samuel blinked, stunned. You mean? Yes, she cut in, though her voice softened ever so slightly. We'd like to meet Nora and Marcus. Samuel swallowed. Are you sure? We're sure, she said, though Samuel could hear something unsure beneath her polished tone. Your father thinks it's time, and I want to meet my grandson. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he finally said, we'll be there. 1 o'clock, don't be late, Martha added before hanging up. Samuel put the phone down, glancing up to find both Nora and Marcus staring at him. What was that? Nora asked warily. Samuel let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. My parents. They want to meet you both. Lunch, their house, Sunday. Nora froze, her eyes wide. Are you serious? Very. Marcus perked up slightly. You mean like grandparents? Samuel smiled at his son's quiet curiosity. Yeah, I guess so. Nora looked less convinced. Are you sure this is a good idea, after everything? Samuel reached across the table, gently touching her hand. I think it's a chance, a start. She didn't pull away this time. Instead, she nodded slowly. Okay, we'll go. Pulling up to the Blackwood mansion was nothing short of overwhelming. The estate loomed large, surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges and a fountain that looked like it belonged in a palace. Marcus pressed his nose to the window, wide-eyed. This is like a castle, he whispered. Samuel laughed nervously. Yeah, something like that. Beside him, Nora looked composed on the outside but was clutching her purse tightly in her lap. This is a lot, she murmured. Samuel reached over, squeezing her hand. We'll take it one step at a time. Together. As they stepped out of the car, the front doors opened and Henry Blackwood stood waiting, hands clasped in front of him. Martha appeared beside him, poised as ever, though her eyes were focused intently on Marcus. Samuel took a deep breath. Mom, Dad. This is Nora, and this, he said, resting a hand on Marcus's shoulder, is Marcus. Marcus looked up at his grandparents, uncertain, clearly nervous. Henry was the first to step forward. To everyone's surprise, he crouched slightly to Marcus's level and held out his hand. Marcus, I'm your grandfather. It's good to finally meet you, son. Marcus hesitated, but then reached out, shaking his grandfather's hand firmly. Hi, he said softly. Henry smiled. Strong handshake, I like that. Martha stepped forward next. Her eyes scanned over Nora, lingering a little too long, but then she turned to Marcus, and her expression softened in a way Samuel had never seen before. Hello, Marcus, she said, her voice more gentle than Samuel expected. Would you like to come inside? We have lunch waiting. Marcus looked up at Samuel, who gave an encouraging nod. Sure, Marcus said, stepping closer to his grandmother. As they walked inside, Nora hung back for a moment, still tense. Samuel leaned in. You okay? She gave him a shaky smile. I guess we're really doing this. We are, he whispered, squeezing her hand again. Lunch was, surprisingly, not a disaster. At first, the table was filled with awkward small talk. Martha asked stiff but polite questions about Marcus's school, and Henry peppered in the occasional joke that made Marcus crack a smile. By the time dessert arrived, the ice was beginning to thaw. So, Marcus, Henry said as the boy tucked into a slice of cake, I hear you play baseball? Marcus perked up. Yeah, I'm a pitcher. Henry smiled, leaning forward. You know, your dad used to play too. Had a wicked fastball back in school. Marcus grinned, glancing at Samuel. Samuel laughed. I wasn't that good, but yeah, guess it runs in the family. Martha even offered a small smile. Samuel was always competitive, even as a boy. As they spoke, Nora began to relax, just a little. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. As Marcus and Henry went out to look at the garden, Martha asked Samuel and Nora to stay behind. I wanted to say, Martha began, looking at Nora with a quiet intensity, that I may have misjudged you. Nora blinked, caught off guard. Martha continued, all I've ever wanted was to protect my son. But I see now that perhaps I was wrong to try to control everything. You've raised a remarkable boy. Nora swallowed hard, her eyes softening. Thank you. And Marcus, Martha added quietly, deserves to know his family, both sides. Samuel felt emotion tighten in his chest as he looked at his mother, a woman who rarely admitted fault, now reaching out in her own way. Thank you, Mom, Samuel said softly. Martha nodded, standing. We'd like to see Marcus again, if that's all right. Nora hesitated, glancing at Samuel, then nodded slowly. I think he'd like that. As they left the estate, Marcus chattered excitedly about the garden, already asking when they could visit again. Samuel looked over at Nora as he drove, hope blooming in his chest. That went better than I thought, he said softly. Nora smiled, watching Marcus in the rearview mirror. Yeah, it did. Samuel reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. And this time, she didn't pull away. For the first time, it felt like the beginning of something real. A family. Slowly, imperfectly, but together. And Samuel knew this was worth fighting for. The bell over Parker's Pizza jingled as the door swung open, but when Nora looked up from the counter, the smile she wore for customers vanished instantly. Macy Lanston stood in the doorway, dressed to perfection in an expensive cream coat and sky-high heels that didn't belong anywhere near a family pizza place. Her sunglasses glinted under the afternoon sun, but when she took them off, her cold blue eyes locked directly on Nora. Nora's stomach twisted. She hadn't seen Macy since the smear campaign that nearly tore her life apart, and the sight of her standing in her shop, her and Marcus's safe place, was enough to make her blood run cold. Macy gave her a sugary sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, Nora Parker. Just the woman I wanted to see. From a booth in the back, Marcus looked up, sensing the tension immediately. His eyes narrowed as he watched Macy approach the counter. Nora stepped around the counter, placing herself between Macy and Marcus in a protective move. You need to leave, she said firmly, her voice low but sharp. Oh, but I'm just here for a chat, Macy purred, glancing around the restaurant with clear disdain. Nice little place you've got here. I can see why Samuel's so enchanted. Simple. Easy. She gave a fake smile. Temporary. Nora crossed her arms. What do you want, Macy? Macy's eyes glinted with malice. Just thought I'd give you a little advice, woman to woman. Don't get too comfortable. Samuel may be playing house right now, but we both know men like him don't stick around for long. That's enough, Nora said tightly, glancing at Marcus, who was now watching them both closely, his face confused and tense. But Macy wasn't finished. She took a step closer, lowering her voice but still sharp as a knife. You really think he's going to give all this up? His company? His world? For you? You're nothing but a passing distraction, Nora. You and that kid. Marcus stood up from his seat, his small fists clenched. Don't talk about my mom like that, he snapped, voice cracking with emotion. Macy looked down at him and sneered. And you must be the reason Samuel's throwing away everything. You're the one ruining his life. Enough. The word cracked like thunder across the shop, making everyone freeze. Nora turned to see Samuel standing in the doorway, his eyes locked on Macy. Cold, furious, and full of protectiveness she had never seen before. Macy's face paled slightly, but she quickly covered it with a smirk. Samuel? Perfect timing. Samuel stepped forward, standing between Macy and Nora, placing a protective hand on Marcus's shoulder. I think you've said enough, Macy. Samuel, really, Macy said, her voice softening into a fake pout. I'm just here trying to remind her where you belong, with me, with your company. Not this. Samuel stared at her, his jaw tight, eyes full of resolve. Where I belong is right here, with them. Nora, Marcus, my family. Macy blinked, caught off guard. Family? She scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Samuel's voice was calm but steel-edged. I've never been more serious in my life. Nora and Marcus are my family now, and nothing you say or do is going to change that. You can't mean that, Macy said, her voice sharper now, panic creeping in. You would give up everything. For them? Samuel didn't hesitate. If it comes to that, yes, I'd leave Blackwood Enterprises before I let you or anyone take me away from them. Macy stared at him, stunned into silence for a moment. And let me make something very clear, Samuel continued, his voice low but full of conviction. I'm not walking away from them, not ever again. I walked away once and it cost me 12 years of my son's life. I won't make that mistake twice. His next words were softer, but no less powerful. He turned slightly toward Nora and Marcus as he spoke, keeping his eyes on Macy. One day, I hope to marry Nora, to give Marcus the family he deserves. And if that makes me walk away from everything I've built, so be it. Macy's mask of confidence slipped, revealing anger and disbelief. You're a fool, Samuel. You'll regret this. You'll regret her. No, Samuel said firmly. The only thing I regret is not fighting for them sooner. Macy stared at him for a long moment, her lips pressed tight. Then she grabbed her purse from the counter where she had tossed it and straightened. Fine, she said icily, but don't come crawling back when she breaks you. Samuel gave her a long, steady look. I'll never need to crawl back to you, Macy. Without another word, Macy turned on her heel and stormed out, the bell over the door chiming harshly as it slammed behind her. The moment she was gone, the tension in the room eased, but Samuel could still feel his heart pounding. Marcus stood close to his side, looking up at him with wide eyes. You really meant that? About staying? Samuel crouched to Marcus's level, placing his hands gently on his son's shoulders. Yeah, buddy. I meant every word. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now. Marcus's face broke into a shy smile, and Samuel felt something in his chest loosen. The first real smile from his son since they'd met. Nora, standing behind the counter, was silent, but her eyes were filled with tears. Not of fear or anger this time, but something softer, something closer to hope. Samuel stood and walked to her slowly. I meant what I said to her, he said quietly, so only Nora could hear. I'm here for you, for Marcus, no matter what. Nora swallowed hard, tears slipping down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. I believe you. Samuel reached out gently, brushing a tear from her cheek. I'm not walking away again, Nora. I'm home, if you'll have me. She smiled through her tears, leaning into his hand. You're home, she whispered back. And for the first time, Samuel Blackwood knew exactly where he belonged. Macy Lanston stormed into the grand Blackwood estate like she owned the place. Heels clicking furiously against the marble floors, her designer handbag swinging from her arm like a weapon. The butler barely had time to announce her before she pushed past him, her jaw tight with determination. "Where is she?" Macy snapped, striding through the long hallway. "Where's Martha?" Before the butler could answer, Martha Blackwood herself appeared at the top of the staircase, calm and composed, looking down at Macy like a queen surveying a disobedient subject. "Macy," Martha said coolly, descending the stairs with slow, deliberate steps. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Don't play games with me, Martha," Macy hissed, her heels clicking rapidly as she closed the distance between them. "I'm here because we have a problem, a mutual problem." Martha raised a brow. "Do we?" Macy scoffed. "Don't act like you don't know what's going on. Samuel has lost his mind, running around with that pizza woman and parading some child around like he's royalty," she sneered. "A child that may not even be his." Martha's eyes narrowed sharply at that, but she said nothing yet, letting Macy continue to hang herself with her words. "I came here," Macy said, lowering her voice as though she were the victim, "because you and I both know this is not how things are supposed to go. You raised Samuel to know his responsibilities, to protect this family's name. You can't let him throw it all away for some woman from his past and her son." Martha took a step forward, her eyes cold as steel now. "And what exactly do you want me to do, Macy?" Macy took a deep breath, shifting gears into manipulation, her tone softening. "I want us to work together, to remind Samuel what's at stake. I can make sure Nora walks away, permanently. I know how to handle women like her." Martha's lips twitched into a smile, but it wasn't warm. "Do you now?" "Yes," Macy said confidently. "We can get rid of her. I'll make sure the press won't touch her again. I'll have Marcus, or whatever his name is, painted as some illegitimate scam. Just give me your support, and I'll take care of the rest. Samuel will thank us later when he realizes we've saved him from a disaster." There was a long, heavy silence. Then Martha tilted her head, examining Macy like she was something foul under her shoe. "You really think you're clever, don't you?" Martha said quietly. Macy blinked, thrown by the sudden chill in her voice. "I'm being practical, for all of us." "For all of us," Martha repeated, her voice like ice. "Or for yourself," Macy bristled. "I'm trying to protect Samuel, to protect this family's reputation." Martha's eyes turned sharp, her voice razor-thin. "Let me be very clear, Macy. You may think you know what's best for Samuel, but you don't know anything about what my family needs. And if you think for 1 second I'm going to let you or anyone come between Samuel and his son, you are gravely mistaken." Macy stared stunned. "But—" Martha cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Marcus is my grandson, flesh and blood, and I will not stand by while you scheme to hurt him or his mother." Macy's mouth fell open. You're really siding with them?" Martha took a step forward, standing so close, Macy had to tilt her chin up to meet her gaze. "I am, because unlike you, I understand that family means more than reputation, more than money, and I will never forgive anyone who tries to harm my grandson, including you." Macy stumbled back, the color draining from her face. "Martha, you can't be serious." "Oh, I am," Martha said with a cold smile. "Consider this your final warning. Stay away from Samuel, stay away from Nora, and stay far away from Marcus. If you don't, I'll make sure you're the one who's destroyed in this city, not them." Macy's eyes widened, shock and fury mixing in her expression. "You wouldn't. Try me," Martha said softly, her eyes glittering dangerously. "You've underestimated me for far too long, Macy. You've mistaken my politeness for weakness. But I protect what is mine. And now that includes Nora and Marcus." There was a long pause, Macy visibly rattled, realizing the woman she thought would be her greatest ally was now her fiercest enemy. "I think it's time you leave, Macy," Martha added, her voice like velvet over steel. "Before I call security to show you out." Macy's lips pressed in a thin line, her eyes burning with silent rage. "You'll regret this," she whispered. Martha smiled coldly. "No, you will." Macy turned sharply on her heel, storming out of the house, her world beginning to crumble around her. Martha stood there for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly as the door slammed behind Macy. But then she took a deep breath, smoothing her jacket and walking toward the sitting room where Henry was waiting quietly, having heard every word. "Well?" Henry asked, raising a brow. "Did you give her the speech?" Martha gave a faint smile, sitting beside him. "More than that." Henry reached over and took her hand. "I'm proud of you." Martha looked out the window, where the city skyline loomed in the distance, and for once she felt a sense of peace. For the first time, she wasn't fighting for status or reputation. She was fighting for her family. And she wasn't about to let anyone, especially Macy, tear them apart. It had been a long week. Samuel sat in the pizza shop after closing, wiping down the tables alongside Nora. They'd fallen into a quiet rhythm, one he had come to cherish. Marcus was in the back, humming to himself as he organized napkin holders like it was the most important job in the world. Samuel glanced over at Nora, watching her work, strong, beautiful, and fierce in ways that still stunned him. Everything he wanted. Everything he knew he'd nearly lost. "You're quiet tonight?" Nora said softly, giving him a sideways glance as she wiped down the counter. Samuel shrugged, smiling a little. "Just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated for a second, then sighed. "About how much I've screwed up, how much I'm still trying to make right." Nora set her cloth down and stepped closer. "Samuel, you're here. That's what matters. You're trying. Marcus sees it. I see it." Samuel looked at her, heart full but still heavy. "I just don't want to mess this up, Nora. You, him, us." Before Nora could say anything, his phone buzzed on the table, vibrating insistently. He glanced at the screen and blinked. "Mom." Samuel hesitated. Lately, things with Martha had been complicated. Better, but still filled with unspoken tension. "Answer it," Nora urged gently, sensing his hesitation. "It's okay." With a deep breath, Samuel picked up the phone. "Hey, Mom." "Samuel." Martha's familiar, cool voice answered, but there was something softer in it this time. "Do you have a minute?" Samuel's heart thudded. "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" "I think it's time we talked," Martha said. "Face to face. Can you stop by?" Samuel glanced at Nora, who nodded encouragingly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'll be there soon." Samuel arrived a short while later, stepping into the grand house that had always felt more like a polished museum than a home. He found Martha sitting in the sunroom, a cup of tea in hand, looking out at the gardens. The sight of her, composed but clearly deep in thought, made Samuel pause at the door. "Mom?" Martha turned to look at him and, to Samuel's surprise, smiled softly. "Come sit with me." Samuel walked in, sitting opposite her, watching her carefully. "You okay?" She nodded, setting her cup down. "I had a visitor today," she began, her voice measured. Samuel tensed. "Macy?" Martha smiled faintly. "Yes, she came to stir up trouble. Thought she could convince me to help her destroy Nora and Marcus. She had plans." Samuel's jaw clenched. "What did you say?" Martha looked at him, her gaze steady. "I told her no." Samuel blinked, caught off guard. "You did?" "I did," she confirmed. "I told her to stay away from all of you, and that if she tried to harm my grandson, she'd answer to me." Samuel felt something inside him loosen, something he didn't realize he had been holding in for so long. "I didn't think you." He trailed off, emotions choking his throat. Martha stood, walking over to stand behind him. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Samuel, I've made many mistakes. I let my pride, my need for appearances, get in the way of being a mother. I pushed you into a life that looked good on the outside but was hollow inside." Samuel swallowed hard, staring ahead. "I'm sorry for that," she whispered. He looked up at her, eyes glistening. "Mom?" Martha took a deep breath and sat beside him, reaching for his hand, something she hadn't done in years. "Marcus is a wonderful boy. And Nora, she's stronger than I ever gave her credit for. I see now why you love her, why you love them both." Samuel squeezed her hand, his throat thick. "You mean that?" "I do," she said firmly. "You don't have to choose between us anymore, Samuel. I choose them too." Tears stung Samuel's eyes as he let out a shaky breath. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Martha smiled, her own eyes softening. I'm ready to be a grandmother. I want to be Marcus's life, and I want to fix things with you. Samuel laughed, a little wet and choked. You'll love him, Mom. He's smart, funny, a little stubborn, like me. Martha's eyes twinkled. Sounds like a Blackwood to me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of distance finally starting to lift. Samuel, Martha said gently, you're not alone in this anymore. You have me and your father's support. Samuel nodded, wiping his eyes. I want that, Mom, more than anything. When Samuel returned to the pizza shop, Nora and Marcus were finishing up for the night, laughing quietly about something. Hey, Samuel said, stepping inside. Hey, Dad, Marcus said, still new to the word but more comfortable now. Samuel's heart swelled every time he heard it. Nora glanced at him, noticing something different in his eyes. Everything okay? Samuel walked over and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She stiffened in surprise but then melted against him, sensing the emotion pouring from him. My mom, Samuel whispered, she stood up for you, for Marcus. She told Macy to stay away. And she wants to be part of Marcus's life. Nora pulled back slightly, searching his face, eyes wide. She did? Samuel nodded, smiling through tears. Yeah, she's ready to be family, all of us. Nora's eyes filled with emotion, and before she could speak, Marcus chimed in. So I get a grandma now? Samuel ruffled Marcus's hair gently. Yeah, kid, looks like you do. Nora laughed softly, tears sliding down her cheeks. I guess we're really becoming a family. Samuel leaned his forehead against hers, holding her close. We always were. We just needed to find our way back to each other. Marcus looked between them, grinning. Does this mean Grandma has to come to my baseball games? Samuel laughed. Oh, definitely. You'll have the loudest cheering section out there. And in that small pizza shop, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and love, Samuel knew he finally had everything he ever wanted. A family, a home, and the chance to start again, stronger than ever. It had been a quiet, perfect evening. The pizza shop was closed early for once, Samuel's idea, and Nora, though suspicious of his sudden suggestion to take a night off, hadn't pressed him too much. Marcus was staying at Henry and Martha's for the first time, much to his excitement and Nora's nervousness. Grandma says she's going to teach me how to make her famous cookies, Marcus had said, grinning ear to ear as he packed his bag. Samuel had watched them together, his mother and his son, with a heart so full he thought it might burst. Now as the sun dipped low and streaked the sky in hues of gold and pink, Samuel stood beside Nora on the rooftop garden of her apartment building, a place she loved for its quiet and the view of the city skyline. Nora leaned against the railing, her eyes scanning the horizon, the breeze playing with her hair, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea he had brought her. Samuel watched her in silence for a moment, memorizing every detail, his heart pounding in his chest. You've been quiet all evening, Nora said softly, glancing at him. Something on your mind? He took a breath and stepped closer. Yeah, something kind of important. Nora arched a brow, half smiling. Should I be worried? He smiled back, but his hands were trembling slightly as he reached into his coat pocket. I've been thinking a lot lately, he said gently, about everything we've been through, about everything I almost lost, everything I don't ever want to lose again. Nora's smile softened, but she watched him closely now, as if sensing the shift in his tone. Samuel took her free hand in his, holding it tightly. When I first came back here, I thought I could just fix everything with one grand gesture. But I was wrong. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about being here, every day, loving you and Marcus the way I should have from the start. Nora swallowed, her eyes glistening. Samuel, let me finish, he whispered, squeezing her hand. You've given me a second chance, one I don't deserve, but one I'm never letting go of. You made me realize what really matters. You and Marcus, you are my home. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Nora gasped softly, her eyes wide as he dropped to one knee. I don't want to live another day without knowing that you're my forever, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't care about the company, the money, or what anyone thinks. I care about you, about Marcus, about the life we're building together." He opened the box to reveal a simple but stunning diamond ring, elegant and timeless. Nothing flashy, just like Nora would want. "Nora Parker," Samuel whispered, gazing up at her with tears in his eyes. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be the husband you deserve, and the father Marcus deserves?" Tears streamed down Nora's cheeks as she covered her mouth, completely overwhelmed. "Samuel," she whispered, her voice breaking. He stood slowly, still holding the ring, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know I've hurt you before, but I swear on everything I have, on everything I am, that I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to doubt me again." Nora let out a shaky breath, a laugh caught between tears. I never thought we'd end up here." Samuel smiled softly, cupping her face in his hand. "Maybe it took us a long time to get here, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." She let out a tearful laugh, nodding. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Samuel's breath left him in a rush as he slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling with relief and joy. As soon as it was on, Nora threw her arms around him, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. But he wouldn't have had it any other way. He buried his face in her neck, holding her just as tightly. "Thank you," he whispered against her skin. "Thank you for giving me a chance to be yours." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "You're not getting rid of us now, Samuel Blackwood. You're stuck with us." He grinned, leaning in to kiss her deeply, a kiss that sealed a promise, a future, a family finally whole. As they stood wrapped in each other's arms, the city lights sparkling around them, Samuel knew one thing for certain: he had fought for them. He had almost lost them, but now he would never let them go. The grand hall of the Blackwood Enterprises headquarters was filled with board members, top executives, and members of the press. A sea of expensive suits, sharp eyes, and camera flashes filled the room. It wasn't often that Samuel Blackwood called a press conference, especially not one that wasn't about business. Behind the polished podium, Samuel adjusted his tie nervously. Today was different. Today wasn't about stock prices or mergers. Today was about family. From the front row, Nora sat with Marcus beside her, holding his hand tightly. Marcus looked around wide-eyed, his fingers fidgeting with his blazer sleeve. It was his first time in such a big room, and despite his usual confident smirks, he was nervous. Nora leaned close and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. You've got this, and your dad's got you." Marcus looked up at her, then at Samuel standing at the podium. "My dad," he whispered to himself. Samuel glanced toward them and gave Marcus a small, reassuring smile, a silent promise. This was for him. The room slowly fell quiet as the reporters prepared their notes, waiting for what they assumed would be some grand corporate announcement. But they were wrong. Samuel stepped forward, clearing his throat, his voice steady but emotional as it carried across the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I know many of you are expecting news about a merger, a new venture, or company expansion. But today, this is about something far more important than business." There was a ripple of confusion through the room. Samuel took a deep breath, glancing again at Marcus before speaking. "For a long time, I've built my life around Blackwood Enterprises, around this company, this name. But today, I'm here to talk about the legacy that truly matters." He paused, steadying himself as emotion thickened his voice. "Several months ago, I discovered someone who changed everything I thought I knew. I discovered I have a son I didn't know about for 12 years. His name is Marcus." Gasps echoed in the room as reporters sat upright, pens flying across their notepads. Nora's grip on Marcus's hand tightened as whispers rippled across the room, but Samuel didn't falter. "I stand here today to tell you all that Marcus is my son, my blood, and my family. And from this day forward, I am making it official, legally and publicly, that Marcus will take my name and become part of everything I am, including this company and its legacy." He looked directly at the cameras now, his eyes fierce but proud. "Marcus Parker will become Marcus Blackwood, and he will be recognized as my heir, not only to my personal estate but to Blackwood Enterprises. He is my son, and no one will ever question that again." Cameras flashed wildly now, reporters leaning forward in shock and excitement, but Samuel's eyes softened as he turned his gaze back to Marcus and Nora. "I missed 12 years of his life," Samuel said quietly, but the microphone carried every word. "I will never forgive myself for that. But what I can do now is make sure Marcus knows and that the world knows he is mine. He belongs. He is a Blackwood." The room fell into a hush, the gravity of Samuel's words settling like a blanket over everyone. Samuel stepped aside and motioned for Marcus to come up. Nora gently nudged Marcus forward. "Go on, sweetheart, he's waiting for you." Marcus stood, his small hands trembling slightly, but there was a spark of something fierce and proud in his eyes, something Samuel recognized in himself. As Marcus walked to the stage, Samuel met him halfway, kneeling down slightly to meet him at eye level. "You ready for this, buddy?" Samuel asked gently, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus bit his lip, but then nodded. "Yeah, Dad." Samuel swallowed hard, reaching out to pull Marcus into a tight hug as camera flashes exploded around them. When they pulled back, Samuel stood tall, resting a protective hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Marcus Blackwood, my son, my pride, my future." The applause that broke out took Samuel by surprise, loud, genuine, and warm. Some board members smiled, others exchanged glances, but the acceptance was there, undeniable. As the applause died down, Samuel turned to Marcus. "You know, I was going to wait until later to tell you," Samuel said softly so only Marcus could hear, "but I've already filed all the paperwork. Your name's officially Marcus Blackwood now. You don't ever have to worry about where you belong again." Marcus's eyes filled with tears as he looked up at his father. "Really?" Samuel nodded, smiling. "Really? You're a Blackwood, son. Always." Marcus grinned, wrapping his arms around Samuel tightly, and Samuel hugged him back, holding his son like he never wanted to let go. After the press had cleared out and the excitement had died down, Samuel, Nora, and Marcus sat in Samuel's office, a place that once felt cold but now was full of warmth and family. Marcus was busy spinning around in Samuel's chair, laughing as he made himself dizzy. Nora sat on the couch, watching them both with a soft smile. Samuel sat beside her, taking her hand gently. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her eyes glimmering. "Yeah, I didn't know you were planning all that." Samuel smiled, his gaze soft. "I wanted to surprise you, both of you." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, her heart full. "You've given him more than a name today, Samuel. You gave him security, family." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "I gave him what I should have given him years ago, but I'll spend every day now making sure he knows he's loved." Nora squeezed his hand, her voice gentle. "You already are." From across the room, Marcus called out, laughing. "Hey, Dad, can I have my own office when I take over someday?" Samuel chuckled, standing up and walking over to his son, ruffling his hair. "You can have whatever you want, kid, because one day all of this will be yours." Marcus grinned. "Cool, but only if I can still play baseball." Samuel laughed. "Deal." And in that moment, Samuel realized he had everything he had ever wanted. Not just a company, not just a name, a family, a son, a future. And this time he wasn't letting go. The sun was shining brightly, casting a soft golden glow over the garden where rows of white chairs were set up, filled with friends, family, and even some employees from Blackwood Enterprises who had become part of their lives. Everything was decorated simply: white flowers, soft greenery, and little touches that felt like home, like the wildflowers that Marcus had insisted on adding because Mom always loved them. A soft breeze drifted through the trees, making the ribbons tied around the chairs flutter gently in the wind. It was beautiful, peaceful, and perfect. Standing near the altar, Samuel adjusted his tie nervously, running a hand through his now slightly tousled hair, less polished, more real, just like the man he had become. Beside him, Marcus stood proudly, holding the small box with the rings, dressed sharply in a tiny suit that made him look like a miniature version of Samuel. "You okay, buddy?" Samuel asked softly, glancing down at his son. Marcus grinned, practically bouncing with excitement. "Yeah, You're really marrying Mom, huh? Samuel laughed, kneeling slightly to Marcus's level, fixing his collar. Yeah, I really am. You good with that? Marcus gave a mock-serious nod. Only if I get double dessert at the party. Samuel grinned, pulling Marcus into a hug. Deal. The music began to play softly, and everyone rose to their feet as Nora appeared at the top of the garden path, Henry proudly escorting her, walking slowly and steadily. Samuel felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, more beautiful than he had ever seen her, wearing a simple, elegant white dress that flowed gently around her, her hair swept up but soft, with a few strands framing her glowing face. Her eyes locked onto Samuel's, and he knew in that moment, this was forever. As she walked down the aisle, Martha held a handkerchief, dabbing at her eyes, while Henry beamed with pride. When Nora reached the altar, Henry gently kissed her cheek, before placing her hand in Samuel's. Take care of my daughter, he whispered to Samuel, though his eyes were warm, full of trust. I will, Samuel promised softly. Always. Nora smiled as Samuel squeezed her hand, both of them taking a deep breath as the officiant began to speak. When it came time for vows, Samuel turned to face Nora fully, holding both her hands. I don't even know where to start, Samuel began, his voice soft but full of emotion. You've given me more than I ever deserved. You've given me love, a second chance, and a son who has changed my life. Nora, you've shown me what family really means, what home really is. And I vow to spend the rest of my life loving you, standing by you, and being the man you and Marcus deserve. You're my home, my heart, my everything. Tears filled Nora's eyes, but her smile was radiant. She took a deep breath, her voice shaking but strong. Samuel, when you came back into our lives, I was scared. Scared to hope, scared to believe you meant what you said, but you proved me wrong. Every single day you've shown up, for me, for Marcus, and I've never felt safer, never felt more loved. I vow to always believe in you, to love you even when life gets hard, and to be your partner, your best friend, and your family. Forever. A soft murmur of emotion ran through the crowd as they finished their vows. Even Martha wiped away tears, dabbing delicately at her eyes as she watched the family she had once doubted become something beautiful. Marcus stepped forward, grinning widely as he opened the ring box. Samuel took Nora's ring first, sliding it gently onto her finger, his hand steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Nora smiled as she took Samuel's hand, sliding his ring on as well. A symbol of everything they had overcome to stand here together. The officiant smiled warmly. By the power vested in me, and with the love surrounding you, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Samuel grinned, pulling Nora close and kissing her deeply as the guests erupted in cheers and applause, and Marcus let out a loud whooping cheer of his own, causing everyone to laugh. The reception was held under a large white tent in the garden, strung with fairy lights and lanterns that glowed softly as the sun set. Laughter and music filled the air as people danced, ate, and toasted to the happy couple. At one point, Samuel stood with a glass raised high, looking around at the gathered family and friends. I used to think success was measured in numbers, he said, voice carrying through the tent. But standing here tonight, looking at my wife, he paused, smiling proudly at Nora, and my son, I realize success is measured by love. By family, by showing up for the people who matter, and I am the luckiest man alive to have found both of them again. Everyone cheered, glasses raised high. Later, Nora danced with Marcus, twirling him around the floor while he laughed uncontrollably. Samuel stood off to the side, watching them with a soft smile until Marcus ran over, grabbing his hand. Come dance with us, Dad. Samuel didn't hesitate, joining them on the floor, spinning Nora and then picking Marcus up and swinging him around as he laughed. It wasn't a perfect waltz. It wasn't a choreographed show, but it was their dance, their family, and it was perfect. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Samuel and Nora stood together under the stars, Marcus fast asleep on a nearby bench, wrapped in a cozy blanket. Nora leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. You did it. she whispered softly. Samuel smiled, kissing her temple. We did it. Together. The end. Hope you enjoyed this beautiful love story. By Green Tea Tales, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Nora looked up at him, her eyes glowing. What now? Samuel grinned. Now we live our life, all of us. And maybe, he added, glancing fondly at Marcus, give him a sibling someday. Nora laughed, her heart full. We'll see. Samuel kissed her softly. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. As long as it's with you. They stood there under the stars, holding each other close, knowing they had finally found their way home. And this time, forever really meant forever. The end. Hope you enjoyed this love story by Green Tea Tales. Help grow our channel. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.